Please join me in welcoming the director, Vinay Shukla. So it's the second time I've watched it. Talk about what started the project. What was the initial motivation, and what started the journey?
Firstly, thank you everybody for coming. What started the project? I remember, Indian television news right now is going through a phase of hyper machoism, as in wherein you have news anchors very proudly proclaiming a very public culture of revenge, right? We are right now going through an era wherein people are very proudly calling on that we must avenge whatever the cause is. And it's a very absurd theater of revenge that's playing out, especially over Indian news TV. And I remember coming across one of Ravish's broadcasts. Unlike most news anchors who spend a lot of time praising their audiences and goading them on and saying, "We are here to serve you," Ravish was actually criticizing his audiences and saying that they're not doing enough and they should be watching news differently, more critically. So I realized that here is a news anchor who's not only questioning governments, but is also questioning his audiences. And it seemed like he was going through a very vulnerable phase himself. He seemed to be in a place wherein he was questioning his own relevance vis-a-vis the society around him. And that is something that I had identified with, to be at a place in your career wherein you begin to wonder that you've prepared craft in you, you've prepared your voice, but if the audience is really interested in you anymore, if you're relevant to them. So it was a good place of introspection that he was at, and I thought I could maybe try and build a newsroom drama around him that would be more introspective about the kind of news that we are making, and through that maybe try and talk about the loneliness that I was feeling, and I know people like me are increasingly feeling in today's world.
So talk about, I mean, your filmmaking. You began with fiction or with nonfiction?
I made a short fiction film, if that counts. I mean, I started with a short fiction film because in India you don't grow up wanting to be a documentary filmmaker. Uh, uh, I, I, I made a fiction film, a short fiction first. Then before this, I co-directed a documentary, which was about this protest movement that became a political party, and then I came to this film. So yeah, but I spent a lot of time training myself in tools of fiction, in terms of structure, narrative, characters, archetypes, cinematography.
Yeah, I mean, you can really feel it. I mean, there's a sense that this unfolds like a fiction drama. So talk about the access. How did you approach Ravish, and what did you tell him? And how long? What was the production process? How long were you shooting? What was your team on the ground?
I remember approaching him at a period wherein he was going through a lot of sort of trolling himself. So I told him that if he'd been basically the film that I did before this, it's called An Insignificant Man. It got me some people knew me a little after that film, so it released in theaters, etc. So when I went to him, he had some idea of who I was. At the same time, he was under such a severe threat to his life, and he was going through so much that he didn't really care that I came around and I said I'd shoot what you are, everything that you're going through right now, because he was like, there's already so much happening. It doesn't matter if one more thing goes wrong, it won't hurt me too much. So he was like, yeah, do whatever you want. I, in the beginning, he pulled a smart move in the sense that he told me that if you can convince the network, then we'll talk, assuming that the network would never sort of give me permission. To their credit, they gave me access immediately. So I went back to him and I was like, they don't mind. What about you? And he was like, what? So it started from there. I had a very young team. I had about 3 other people. So me and Aman, we shot it together. This is the first film that Aman has shot. There was a Reshma who worked on the story. She also did sound, and there was Kalan who did sound. So about 3 to 4 people on most days. Very young crew, very small crew. and a lot of the good things that are in the film are purely because of their passion for the project, in spite of my cynicism.
And talk about, I mean, there's almost like a kind of existential dread throughout the film. I mean, and the risks. I mean, there's the risks to the reporters, to the death threats. There's the sort of risk to democracy. There's the risk to journalism itself, right? The sort of these institutions, and when you started, were those risks, like, where were they, if they, yeah, and then also for you and your team, the risks.
I think, the thing is, when you're making a film like this, you're at the beginning of the project, you're aware that there are risks, right? And during the project, while you're making it, they become, from risk, they become problems that you need to solve, right? So you go like, I need to deal with this today, I need to deal with this over the next month, so on and so forth. Because once you plunge in, then it's too late to worry, or necessarily, uh, uh, you know let it hold you down. For example, I remember watching Citizen 4, and at the opening of Citizen 4, in you read out the initial sort of conversation, or when Edward Snowden reached out to you, he told you this is what you need to do, and that you have to trust him, and that your communication protocols are going to be so on and so forth, and this is how we can take it forward, and that it won't go to waste. uh, what that does, I remember watching that film and feeling like, so this is this is a place that filmmakers can go to, right? And being tremendously moved by the power of that film. But while I was making this film, I just realized, you spend a lot of time looking at everything as risk, right? When you're within this newsroom, when you're within this organization, when you're dealing with a protagonist, your brain gets wired very differently, in that you begin to look at most things as things that could possibly go wrong, and everything has a lot of stakes attached to it, right? So your fundamental understanding of the world is then pulled by a different gravitational force, which is of heightened stakes to everything that you're doing. uh, and then that begins to guide all your decisions around the project. So you make some very good calls, some highly irrational ones, right? Right, wherein somebody would see you and go like, wow, you are really overreacting. There is no need for you to have 24 hours disappearing chats, or whatever it is that you're doing, right? And fundamentally, I'm just saying, it changes, or maybe it enhances your process of filmmaking as you go forward. So my coming back to your question of, with regards to, managing access, you were always, access is a waltz. It's a dance on most days when you're shooting with, in a sensitive place like a newsroom. Some days you get a lot of access, some days you don't get any, but finally you make a film that makes it seem like you had incredible access throughout. Right? But that access is also constantly guided by your own concerns, your fear for your subjects, your fear for your film, your concerns with regards to depiction, your understanding that you are working in a newsroom where most people are aware of the power of the camera. Very often, you've sometimes, not very often, but you go to you when you're shooting docs, you have to go and tell your subject what a documentary is and where it's going to come out, right? Within this newsroom, everybody knew what a documentary is. So you are then very aware that you're waiting for people to fatigue out and show themselves to you on camera, in a manner that aligns with what you're looking for, right? Or that challenges what you're looking for. uh, uh, and of course, there's a heightened risk of this institution sort of going down, the press freedom, or people you witness. Press freedom seems like an abstract idea, but when you see people in their 50s losing their jobs, people who don't necessarily come from a fair amount of socio-economic power. Uh, uh, the 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 act of bearing witness uh, to is that is something that I try to put into the process of making this film. Like when people are watching it, I wanted them to somehow be able to feel the power of you know, it's like a satellite, it's like a rocket shedding its sort of weight off. uh, 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 and I wanted people to somehow be able to feel the power of that. When what happens when institutions or large institutions like these go down, we very often read them like newspaper headlines, but what does it actually feel like when you're on ground?
Yeah, I mean, it's done so poignantly with these scenes, this where they're cutting the cake and saying goodbye. Can you talk about when did you first encounter that and know that it was going to be a returning scene?
I encountered it on the first day of shoot, and like any other greedy filmmaker, I got very excited when I saw it, saying that wow, this could possibly make for a great moment in a film. Of course it's a tragedy, but your filmmaking brain is able to somehow understand the need for that in a film. So I saw it on the first day. I got very excited, and I've spoken about this in the past. when I- when I was just watching films as a student, I'd seen the Godfather films, and in that, whenever they show oranges on screen, it's usually followed by bloodshed. Uh, so it's something that stayed with me, and I thought maybe it'll be a cool thing to do at some point in my career. So when I came across this, it's also weirdly, it's also a very it's also very it's something that adults do, right? Like to in the most harshest of moments of people having to leave for reasons that they have outside of their control. There is no, like, some sort of big moment wherein people have a screaming match. No, they cut a cake, they stand around, they clap at each other, and they go like, so long. I found there to be some beauty in that moment, and a lot of sadness.
Yeah. You and I mean, I have a lot of affinity for this film, and then we also share some collaborators in it. And can you talk about the role of Jess Search and Dog Society and yeah.
um, Jess is an exec producer on the film. um, I worked with her extensively. uh, I made a film before this, and she was that's when I got through Doc Society through an open call because I filled an application, and they saw my film and they said it's pretty good. So do you need some money? And I said yes. So they made the first film happen. On this film, Jess was uh, Jess was like a north star, in that she guided the film through some very very difficult production days. Uh, I mean, the thing is, she wasn't like most other executives. Uh, she was incredibly. She was a visionary. She would on most difficult days in production. I keep telling this. I keep telling people, this one time, I was working with, at that point, a major American corporation, who were production partners on the film, and then at one point they were like, no, not doing this. Uh, and there was financial and emotional betrayal. So I reached out to Jess and Maxine over a phone call, and within half an hour they were both on the call. And the first thing that Maxine promised me was love, community, and friendship. And the first thing that Jess promised me was cold revenge. Je- Jess. So that was Jess. Jess was like, I know the parties these people go to. And if they think they can do this in India and get away with it, there is no fucking way. So you don't worry, we'll go out and get them. So Jess was like that. She would, on when I was really stressed about some contract that I had signed without discussing with her, she would read me poems on a on a Zoom call. And she had incredible she had a sense of community. And what's beautiful about it is that she had you in her life and she had me, which makes no sense when I think about it. When she passed, I remember reading people had written about her, and there were so many filmmakers who wrote for her so fondly, just like I felt about her. And I was just amazed that she had so many like me in her life. I was like, where did she find the time?
I know.
I mean, and I remember like reading about that story wherein you and her went and projected the codes on the side of the parliament. You should tell people about that.
Well, I mean, she did it. It, I mean, she was traveling constantly to Berlin because I wasn't really able to travel at that time. And she and BritDoc took at that time BritDoc, now Doc Society, released Citizen 4 in the UK. With we couldn't travel, and then they did this fantastic thing where they projected top secret code names from the GCHQ all over Parliament, on Parliament all over town, driving around in a truck, and that's how it was one of the ways that they promoted the film.
And the thing is, it's very rare for people to assume risks personally.
Yeah.
It's all cool to be supportive, and I know a lot of people who are able to be supportive, but Jess would just go and stand in front of you and be ready to take the bullet. And I saw her do it multiple times, and I have no idea where she had that certainty or confidence or courage from. Like, I have some courage, but not that much. Right? Like when I see Jess, so she was also somebody who you could draw, she was like a reservoir of courage. Like you could reach out, and when you didn't have enough, she'd give you enough to sort of make it through.